Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast for today. We've got Patrick back in Wales, and I'm back in Cornwall. So, Patrick, there's a few things we want to cover today. You've just come back from COP. I've come back from the Nuffield Farming Conference. Tell me, what did you learn in COP after, and what are your reflections on all the sort of politics that's come out of it?
Well, it seems a long time ago already, almost a distant memory, but I refer to it in conversations and everybody says, oh, was there any point in it because of all the headlines about, fossil fuels wasn't even in the final agreement and is it a busted flush and do we need to keep on doing that? And I think that bringing 56,000 people together from all over the world, not necessarily in the zone where they're actually trying to broker an agreement, but just actually meeting people, experiencing our common humanity, making friends, building partnerships, a lot, in my case, with corporates and private companies, including food companies and retailers, those sorts of people, banks, financial people. I think it was amazing. And there was I won't bore you with listing them, but I've got a huge number of people that I met or renewed contacts with over the week I was there that I know will lead to really positive outcomes. So I'm glad I went. It was the fifth in a row. I probably, wherever it is next year, I think it's going to be Turkey. I'll probably show up and see what happens. That's my view. Someone's got to do it.
I think it's
As a friend of
Armenia
mine
next.
once said, oh, you're in the saving the world business. Well, good luck to you. Someone's got to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've got friends actually who are already trying to get a bunch of us to go to the next one because I would like to go too. It's Armenia next, Patrick. I think that's
Oh, they've
right.
decided on it now, have they? It's not Turkey.
Wow. Wow.
Okay.
As far as I know.
Armenia, that's a very interesting place. That's like the geographic sort of meeting place between the East and the West. Very
Mhm.
powerful,
I guess
spiritually and physically powerful.
the Silk Road probably would have gone through there at one point, I suppose, wouldn't it?
Yes, where the Silk Road went through last year's, Baku,
Mm.
Azerbaijan.
Interesting. Yeah, it's an exciting thing, and I've just come back from the Nuffield Farming Conference up in Aberdeen.
Tell me about that.
This is
I'd love to hear about that.
well, it's a
Oh, by
really
the way,
amazing thing.
sorry to interrupt you, but you won't say this, but you are the first brothers who simultaneously are doing Nuffield scholarships, right? So that's just worth a mention.
Yeah, that's true.
And
It's our
by the
claim
way,
to fame.
also to interrupt you again, I am member of another club. I'm a failed Nuffield scholar.
Oh, Patrick, I
I
don't.
know,
I,
but
I feel
it's a special club.
it is. I
Sophie
know.
Gregory's husband is in that club.
I do feel a little guilty when I talk to you that I'm in this exclusive club that you're not allowed in. Uh,
It was
but
good.
yeah, it's really
It was
cool.
a fascinating experience. I put in the application in 1989, I think it was. And my project, which got turned down by the very conventional people who interviewed me, was community farms. Is there a future for them? Can I find the most successful community sustainable farming projects and go and visit them all over the world? I think they thought I was on something, and I probably was.
I think you probably were, Patrick. But if you went for that now, I reckon you'd probably get it. It's
Exactly.
really modernised, and there's some fantastic different projects which are sort of put forward now. I think there's still a few of the old guard in there who would rather we were still back to those very conventional farming ideas. But no, there's a load of really important work going on to take farming forward for the future. And like you just said, my brother and I are both doing it in the same year. So my brother Dave, he's doing it on stacking land uses for sustainability and profitability. And then my one is on fossil-free farming, which I always tell absolutely everyone all the time. So you've probably all heard that before. But it wasn't our presenting year, it's the year before. So we went up to Aberdeen and we had some amazing chats with amazing people. The coolest thing is, I think that the current head of the NFU is a Nuffield scholar. The head of AHDB is a Nuffield scholar. The head of the CLA now is a Nuffield scholar. So we're taking over as a gang.
Or you
And
could
so
say, thank goodness I'm in the failed Nuffield Scholarship Club.
exactly.
I don't mean that at the expense of those wonderful individuals. I just mean that maybe at that time it was better to be a failure.
I think there is something in that, Patrick. I think there is, uh, we get stuck in agriculture in what it used to be a lot of the time, and pushing forward is always hard. It's a painful thing because it means accepting that everything we do isn't necessarily perfect. So I think that's one thing. But yeah, we learned some amazing things. I learned all about peat, which I loved. That was probably my favorite one. I learned about the importance of the carbon stored in peat around the UK and around the world, actually, and the incredible amount of damage that happens when we farm it, even though it's one of the most productive bits of ground that we can use for growing vegetables. So that was fascinating.
Well, now,
And
on that
then,
subject, isn't it true that a lot of the vegetables that we eat today are grown in the fens of East Anglia in systems which are incredibly carbon depleting? So that's quite interesting. It might even be that vegetables purchased in a supermarket today are worse for carbon than livestock.
well, definitely, if you think about it in systems, I think there's something to think about that. So I think the methane and that kind of thing emitted from directly from the cow. If you just look at that, it's probably worse. But if you look at systems and how they bring other benefits back in and enable more sequestration of carbon and things like that, then I think the subject probably changes a lot. But let's not dive into that too far, Patrick, because we are going to get sucked in for the whole time, because we could talk about that all day, I know. Another thing we looked at, which sort of leads me into what we've been up to now, really, is they were talking about the grading system on cattle and how we grade our animals for meat. For the moment, we kind of grade our animals on, how much muscle there is and how much the percentage of fat, but we don't ever grade on eating quality. And other countries, Australia, New Zealand, they grade on eating quality. And so there's loads and loads of different factors in amongst that. But that means that the animals that they are producing are specifically bred to taste great. And also have a great texture. And so it's something where I think we really need to start looking at in the UK as maybe this is going to be the future, because other countries who buy the meat from those countries want that. So it might open up more export markets for us too. So it's definitely something that was interesting.
Well, let
And I
me.
talked about, go on.
I don't want to disappear down an eating quality rabbit hole, but since you weren't around there then, and you might not know this, the current carcass specification for livestock throughout Europe, probably throughout the world, came into being as a result, indirectly, of a government report called the NACNI report, which was published, I think, in the mid 80s, which said basically that animal fats are bad for you. And also sugar's bad for you. And this was leaked by a woman called Caroline Walker, who worked for MAF, but she leaked it to her then boyfriend, Jeffrey Cannon, who now lives in Brazil. He was a journalist and a food policy guy. And it was front page headlines in the Sunday Times. And the government was so embarrassed by this leak that they commissioned another report called the Coma Report, which said animal fats are bad, and they took sugar away. They just demonized animal fats. And that report shifted the British diet for the last 40 years. So I'd say we're still suffering from that report, which said, don't eat animal fats. They're bad for you. They're bad for your health, and they're just bad. And everybody started to eat margarine, low-fat milk, even, skim milk, not let alone semi-skim milk. And even though that report, out of its 12 board members, 7 of them had interest in the sugar industry, it was sufficiently authoritative, quote unquote, for the government to take it seriously, and that altered the specification for carcasses. So now, if you send a traditional British animal, British beef breed, to the slaughterhouse, you will get downgraded because it's all about lean meat and muscle, as you said, whereas fat is bad for you, quote unquote. So isn't that interesting how an orthodoxy can become entrenched and then last for decades? And now finally, your wonderful Nuffle people are challenging that.
Yes, and annoyingly though, this isn't the first report in that subject. It's taking years, and everyone keeps saying the same thing, but it is so entrenched. We need to get people thinking about changing this, because we are valuing the wrong thing, I think. And
Exactly.
let's be
No
let's be
one
very
even, see,
open
you
though.
didn't know about those 2 reports, did you?
No, I didn't. That's
So
correct. I did
this
know
is
about
the,
the grading systems, but
yeah, but the grading systems were altered because of those reports. And
mm,
my dear departed colleague, Richard Young, knew all about this, and he was going to do a report on it, on animal fats and how they've been demonized wrongly. So actually, I'm sort of carrying that as part of his legacy. So that's why I wanted to bring it up.
we'll dive into that further. I know that the SFT is doing quite a lot around local slaughterhouses and things like that, and butchery in general. So I think we'll be speaking about that quite a lot. But what took me further onto this sort of subject was this week I ended up finding myself in a slaughterhouse, which I've never done before. It was basically, we had three cull cows going to the slaughterhouse, which, they were like 15, so they'd had a good innings, these girls, but they were at the end of their days. And so we took them through, and we wanted to get some samples of the livers from them to be tested, because we're always wanting to make sure that everything's tip top for the rest of our breeding. And they said, "Oh, do you want to come in and actually see the line?" And my immediate reaction was absolutely not. I don't want to see all that, really. But then I realized I absolutely have to. I think I've never seen that before. My brother has, and he said, "No, you should see this. It's something which I think we all need to be able to understand." And as farmers, we keep these animals and we love our animals and we want to make sure they have a best life, but we also want to make sure that they have dignity in their death, and that everything's being done with the maximum attention to detail as possible. I'm not going to pretend it's something I enjoyed, and I'm not going to pretend it's something which is try and sanitize it. It's a gross thing, isn't it? The idea of death. We struggle with it as humans across all aspects of our lives. But when I went in there, it was incredibly. It was actually, my initial thing was, it was so overwhelming. It was really noisy. This is actually in the sort of the main cutting area. It's so noisy. It was huge height. So lots of hydraulic things with people going up on platforms to be able to reach the whole length of the carcass. But what I realized was the animal was long dispatched before it got into there. So it was never, it never had to deal with all those noises. And I went back through the line to where it all began. And that's where the animal started. And they never saw any of that. Their handling system is almost the same as our home handling system. It's very, very similar. It's designed in a way that makes sure that the animal is as stress-free as possible, because any stress is bad for meat quality, and really bad for the length of the life of that product. So it's really important that they say stress-free for so many reasons. So that's great. And then they're dispatched before they're able to, using electric. So and 3 times as well. So there's one plate to the nose, one plate that goes underneath to go to the heart. So you've got the brain, the heart, and then a third one that goes down on the back to do the spine. So you've
So
got
can I
3 points.
can I interrupt you and just ask, because a lot of people listening to this, and by the way, it's very interesting to ask the question: who is listening to these podcasts? We'd like to know. I think it's between 1,000 and 2,000 downloads we have. But if you are listening to this or watching this, and you're not a farmer, and I guess a lot of people who are watching this won't be a farmer, we'd love to know whether you're interested in these themes, because I think it's really important that people know more about this. So, assuming that not everyone knows how animals are slaughtered, so you are saying that they're killed with electric shocks, whereas I thought that the captive bolt, which is basically a sort of captive bullet fired into the brain of the animal, was the normal method of slaughter. But you're saying in this particular abattoir, it's all electric.
That's correct. Yes. So they find that basically it's very reliable. So it always works with electric, because you have this water plate, which is so you're sort of guaranteed contact. The trouble with a captive bolt is you could in theory miss the brain, and so then you might have to do it again. And so I think if you can reduce and remove any human intervention into it, so this is all done automatically in that machine. If you can reduce that intervention of humans, I think you reduce the potential for failure rate, I suppose. And so that's kind of a really important part of that. But yeah, the electric as well, it works with having fewer humans interacting with the animals too. So humans are stressful to animals, and so if we
Well,
can not have humans
might I
around,
say, they
mm,
sometimes are stressful to animals. If the animals love and trust the people who look after them, then they're not stressful. So you bring in
no,
something important there.
yeah, I think that's a good point. However, that foreign environment they've already been transported there. It's not too far from us, but even so, they've been transported there. They're in a new pen that they haven't seen before, new smells, all those kind of things. So there are those kind of elements that you kind of want to take away any opportunity for stress, I suppose. Also, our animals don't see humans a huge amount because a lot of them live out on the heathland most of the time. We'll put our cows up onto the heathland early in the summer, and they'll come back late in the summer, and so we'll go and check them, of course, every day. But we certainly aren't interacting with them all the time. So they're not like your cows, Patrick, where they're being milked every single day twice and getting therefore handled. So they are more wild than yours would be.
Yes.
And I wouldn't
Well,
say it's a negative.
so I've got lots to say already from what you've just shared. But
Go on,
before I
give us
say it,
something.
can I ask you a couple more questions about your
Yeah.
experience? So this abattoir, which is in Cornwall, right?
Yes.
How many animals a week or a year go through that abattoir, and where do they go? So before we go further, I want to ask you some questions about the abattoir. It's in Cornwall, right? And it brings animals just from Cornwall or outside Cornwall as well. Do you know?
Well, it's quite far up, so it'll be coming from outside of Cornwall as well, and
Do you know how far away?
well, it'll be up into mid Devon, I suppose. In theory, it could take them from further, but mid Devon, and then you start going up into the other sort of abattoirs further up, so there's no need for it.
Yeah, well, that's quite an important issue in its own right, how far they travel
Mm.
to slaughter. In fact, I think it's one of the most important issues. But let's just talk about throughput. They kill a lot of animals there. If we can speak about it that frankly. Do you know
Yeah.
how many in a week, or what it was designed for, or that sort of thing?
Yeah, so it was designed originally to take like 100 animals a day. But actually now, with loads of efficiency improvements there, it's quite a small site, but they've managed to get it killing 2,000 animals a week. So it's really, that's its absolute maximum. But gosh, it is so busy there. Honestly, there isn't a spare spot to stand to be able to even watch, really. It's such an incredible throughput.
So do you know where the meat from those animals ends up?
Yeah, so it goes off into various different supermarkets mostly. So it
Various.
would be, yeah, various, yeah, because they're independent abattoir, so it
So
goes to different ones.
I'm thinking this through. So
Yeah.
you send an animal, one of your animals, three or four
Hmm.
barren cows or whatever they are, animals at the end of their lives, um, through this abattoir. They pay you, and you were interested in their livers because you're worried about their livers because they had a reject or something,
Hmm.
and you don't know where they go. It's the truth of it.
We will know in general because they'll be sold, and so ours will often go into Tesco, for example, because they're organic.
They won't tell you where it goes.
I think they normally do, actually. They normally do say that they're satisfying a contract for someone. So it's all very, very traceable, of course, because it has to be. Because
Yes,
if
but
there were any issues, it would have come back to us.
there's a difference between traceable, meaning that if you were a nerdy customer and you said, I bought some Tesco beef, where did it come from? They can say, well, we've got tracking that can take it through the abattoir to the primary producer, that's you in this case,
Mm,
and something which tells you, both as a farmer, but also as a customer, automatically and visually what the story was and
mm,
where it came from. And I'm only raising that because I think Guy Watson has done something. I haven't watched it yet, but he had one of his rants, and I'm not saying that in a pejorative way, about how there are all these fake stories that supermarkets use, which
mm,
basically describe a fictitious farm. And actually, the farm doesn't exist, but they've invented it because it gives the impression to the customer that there is a story behind the food. And I'm just going to say to you that what you're telling me is that it was a pretty welfare-friendly lairage. And
mm.
by the way, to listeners, lairage means when the animals get to the abattoir, they go into this handling system, which more and more these days has been designed in a pretty welfare-friendly way sometimes by a woman called Temple Grandin, who's a kind of autistic American professor who thinks and feels like a cow. And because of her special perception, she knows how to design handling facilities which are very animal-friendly and welfare-friendly. And I imagine that your lairage and the race, which is like the channel which takes them to the slaughter, is probably designed in that way. Is that right?
As far as I'm aware, yes, they're incredibly they want to be able to handle the animals when they go in because it's really important that they keep them calm. They always have people working in that area who there's no sticks, there's no shouting, there's no pushing animals around, being aggressive. So it's all designed in a way that the animal will naturally move that way because it's quicker, it's safer, it keeps the animal. The amount of hormones in their blood lower, so therefore they are able to not so they'll be better when they're killed, so that then the meat quality is better. So it's in everyone's interest for that to happen. And
Yeah, so
actually
that's
it took
great.
about 20 minutes, from the moment we took them out of our cattle trailer, we parked up, we went around, we went in, we got dressed up in some coats, and they came through. It's 20 to 30 minutes.
A couple of other questions because I want to share my experience this week. It's quite weird that you've been in an abattoir this week. So have I, just
Oh,
yesterday.
have you?
So
Okay.
yeah. So do you know if you wanted to send your beast for what's called private kill to
Hmm.
this particular abattoir, this 2,000 a week abattoir, would they take the beast that you went accompanied to the abattoir, kill it for you, and give it back to you?
Well, no, not that one. They don't do private kill. We use another one for that. So we actually
Okay.
also did bring back some beef. So we had a small animal. It was one that went over age. It was growing far too slowly. And so we do this every year. We always
So,
have a few that come back to us on the farm here, and then we sell
so
them to friends.
So you know what I was saying about the NACNI report and the COMA report? What's
Mm.
this overage business you're referring to?
Well, that goes back to BSE. So BSE was a problem, obviously, that went into the spinal cord and brain and all the rest of it. And they found that it was much worse in older animals. And so, as part of these sort of rules around making sure that people around the world would take our animals, but also the general public would eat our animals, they put a limit on the age of animals at 30 months of when you were allowed to sell them into the food chain. So for many years, you weren't even allowed to, those cull cows would never have gone to food. They would have gone into, I don't know, dog food or something like that. And so now there is you get to 30 months, there's a rule change. So they just have to be tested to see if they have the BSE in them, and they take away the spinal cord and things. So,
Yes. So my point really is that the 30-month rule, because I was around during BSC, I mean, I was in the thick
yeah.
of it. And in fact, I was working for the Soil Association at that time, and we did a big campaign about the fact that an organic animal, there was no a record of any organic animals that had tested positive for BSE, and we proposed that that was because the organic animals were not allowed to eat animal protein, which is almost certainly
Mm.
what led to BSE. But the 30-month rule, as it is known, was imposed really. It was a fake thing, really. It was because if BSE was going to incubate and show, it would be after 30 months. So they thought, well, let's just close it down so that even if there is incubating BSE in the animals, it'll never show because they get slaughtered before that. But my point about that is that the unintended consequences of the 30-month rule included the fact that the traditional breeds, which are slower finishing, uh, couldn't go through that system. So that also accelerated the trend towards fast finishing breeds, which ironically are now called more carbon friendly. And I just pick you up on that because you said, I think, what did you say? You used the word like, it sounded pejorative that you had a slow finishing animal as if that wasn't
Mm.
ideal. And I thought,
Yeah.
that's interesting. That's gone into your mentality.
Yeah, it's overage. And there
Overage.
is an
So
element of
think
that
about
in
it.
there, Patrick.
Overage. Think about
Yeah.
those words. Overage. It means
Yeah.
too old.
It is pejorative.
It
Yeah, it
is.
does.
Interesting.
I would push back a little bit on that. So the reason an overaged animal is a problem is because it costs more. to raise at that point. They aren't growing. They're still eating all the food. They're just not really growing very well. And they're never going to really make the spec to be worth very much. So
Well,
that animal
yeah. I
finished quite
mean,
small.
I know Highland cattle and native breeds, other native breeds, but especially these really slow growing breeds that almost fatten off the view, or rushes in the case of Welsh Blacks. Is that
Yeah.
such a bad thing? I just want to check, because I think you've absorbed some of this as if slow growing is bad. I think slow growing could be good, especially if the animals finish exclusively on forage. And if you have one of these more modern breeds, it's difficult to get them to finish. And by the way, for listeners, finish means really ideally in the state where they can be slaughtered to get maximum benefit for eating quality, but also for the farmer. So these slower growing breeds have become unfashionable, and the grading system, which you already referred to, makes them outside the grading system, and therefore you'll be penalized if you send one of those animals in. So I think you've absorbed some of that rhetoric, if you see what I mean.
I think so, but if we think economics as well, I think there is a compromise in there. I would rather that the limit was slightly higher than 30 months. We do have Welsh Blacks. They are organic. We would love to finish more ourselves. We don't finish them all ourselves. We actually send them to another organic producer who has slightly lusher grass than us to finish them off often. But I would say we have to, even though we're trying to do everything we can for the environment, sustainability, and all the rest of it, we are very conscious about we need to make money. And I never apologize for trying to make money out of farming. And so we do have to weigh up all those figures. And so when you look at different breeds, the slower growing ones, although they may taste better, they may not, by the way, because they may be slightly chewier. A fast-grown beef actually is often softer on the mouthfeel, so they aren't necessarily going to grade better in this new system, by the way. But I do think you're exactly correct that we do need to be flexible with our breeds. Our Welsh Blacks are the only thing that is commercially viable and thrives on our heathland around us, and so they suit our land perfectly. So luckily, they do finish very well, and they're a beautiful tasting animal, and they're actually a really good beef animal too. I'm always pushing the Welsh Black as the best breed.
I hope you don't mind me pulling you up on some of these things. I'm not trying to be rude, or I just think these are important issues. And if I may share my story, because you'll know that before you started working more closely with us, we've been known for our small abattoir campaign. And we've, particularly Megan Perry, who heads it up, has done some fantastic work with Richard Young as well, who I already mentioned before her, in campaigning to stop the closure of small abattoirs. And I think there are millions of people who are anxious, have an underlying anxiety when they buy meat in a supermarket or anywhere, whether it's a burger or a supermarket, anywhere, about the story behind not only the life of that animal, but also its death. And we produced a report called A Good Life and a Good Death, which is really about how local abattoirs, with a very short distance to slaughter, is the story that you would want to know when you buy meat wherever you buy it. And because of the closure of small abattoirs, which are still closing at an alarming rate, it's making it impossible for local meat from local farms to be a reality. And although I commend the abattoir that you went to for their high animal welfare and the lairage, the truth is, and you don't even know this, that animal might have travelled a long distance to slaughter. And in the case of an abattoir near me here in West Wales, there's an abattoir which kills all the lambs for Sainsbury's, and some of them come from Scotland. And that can't be a good thing. And again, I'm not criticising either Sainsbury's or the abattoir. I'm saying that's the story that you don't really want to know, do you, when you buy your meat? And I think it's our job to bring this to the public's attention, that a lot of the meat that people are eating these days comes from systems, including abattoirs, with not a very good story, even if the welfare in the lairage is good. And the only way we can change that is if more people know about it. What would you say to that?
I would say you're right, Patrick. I think there is a lot of things that we could do a lot better in our meat and abattoir systems. Our lambs sometimes are, like you just said, they do go further. There isn't a lot of killing of lambs down here.
They'd probably come to Llanybother, actually. They'd probably come to the abattoir I just mentioned.
Yeah, a lot of them do, I think. And so some of them just go into Devon, and some of them are done down here, actually. But when you're organic as well, your options are limited as well. So even though we're doing the best through their lives, they might end up having to go further at the end.
Well, let me share my abattoir story.
Go for
Um,
it.
Yesterday, I went to a movable abattoir, otherwise known as a mobile abattoir, which was pioneered by um, a farm in the Cotswolds, run by Jane Parker, who's the chair of the board of the Sustainable Food Trust, who has really done some fantastic pioneering work in an economic environment which is extremely challenging to try to promote the cause of local slaughter, even in this case on the farm where the animal lived. And literally, they killed the first animal in this system, which they invested in to show up as a template, if you like. And it's, as is so often the case, the first mover doesn't get the advantage. So this is it's an amazing lairage system. And Jane had even made sure that as the animal goes down the race to the slaughter pen, there was a barn with a window ahead of it so that the animal will be attracted towards greenery and fields. And I think that attention to detail is so wonderful. And it moved me to be there. And I saw the carcass of the animal, an animal from that farm that had been killed the previous day. And you could see the whole thing was a great story. You could have filmed the whole lot of it, everything, and
Mm.
nobody would have been upset at all. And I think one of my feelings is about our mission is to try to create the conditions where many more of those great small local slaughtering stories can be the reality rather than the wish, if you see what I mean. Now, how you do that and how you scale it is a big challenge, because you'll probably know this, that you have to have a vet on duty to witness the slaughter and make sure that everything's right. But in a small abattoir, you have the much more disproportionate high cost, obviously, for the person being there and witnessing it, which is one of
Yeah.
the reasons why the small abattoirs are still closing down. But the other
Mm.
reason is because all the supermarkets and the big meat companies will have what they might call a preferred abattoir. So if you want to sell meat to Tesco or to Sainsbury's, any of them, they will say, well, they've all got to go through this abattoir. And if
Mm.
I, as their customer, was to say, and this is the important bit, what is your distance to slaughter of the animals that you sell in your stores? And it was like 100 miles or 300 miles or even more than that. They would be held to account. And this is not an anti-supermarket point, because most of us shop in supermarkets. It's to say that we are the powerful ones. And if enough people see that they can say to their customer service desk, we want to buy meat from an animal that hasn't traveled more than X miles to slaughter, that would be a game changer. If you think about it,
Mm.
the abattoir near you, if that was killing for, say, 3 supermarkets, but all of them had a policy of no more than 100 miles to slaughter, or even less than that, maybe, if there were enough abattoirs to go round, that would change the whole infrastructure. And at the moment, there really aren't any limits on that, which I think is shocking.
Mm. I think you're right, Patrick. I think we've got to keep thinking about that and pushing on it. And if anyone has any ideas to try and push that forward, keep in touch with us, because it is a campaign that the SFT is working on quite heavily. So I think it's something where there's a lot more to do, and we will keep pushing. Now, Patrick, you have been seeing small dairy in the news, and you said you want to talk about that. Go on, give me an update on that.
Yes, well, I'm aware we've covered a lot of ground already, and we've probably had 15 minutes on abattoirs, which is probably no bad thing. But another thing which is going on related to this, what I would see it as sort of extraction of the social and the environmental capital that the modern food system has caused, is the demise of small dairy farms. And some of you might have heard an interview with Robert Craig, who's a great friend of mine. He's the chair of the Royal Association of Dairy Farmers. Um, and he was interviewed on Farming Today, I think on Wednesday this week, about what's going on with dairy. And he shared this statistic, which I already knew it, but it still shocked me. When he started dairying 40 years ago, I think there were 54,000 dairy farmers in the UK. And I think there are around 6,000 today. And he is predicting that because of the price squeeze, which dairy farmers, it's a very sort of boom and bust thing with dairy farming. You get a very high milk price, which has been the case for the last year or so. And then there's oversupply because of all the dairy farmers respond to it. And ironically, one of the points he made was that because of the drought, dairy farmers have had to feed a lot of other stuff like grain from South America or other arable byproducts. And ironically, because the milk to purchase speed ratio was positive, they all started feeding this stuff, and their milk supply actually went up, even despite the fact that there was no grass and no forage. So we're always our own worst enemies in farming. And so now all the dairy companies are cutting the price of milk. And the people who suffer most from that are the small dairy farms. And I'm just going to tell you this story. There's a dairy farm down the road from us, about 5 miles from where I'm sitting now, called Tinloft. And in Wales, we always know the farmers by the name of the farmer and their name of their place. So it's John Tinloft, and he's a lovely man, and he has a 100-cow dairy farm. In the 80s, I think it was the 80s, it might have been the early 90s, he won the Farmers Weekly Best Dairy Farm in Britain competition. And it was all over the Farmers Weekly. Last week, he sold his cows in Carmarthen Market. And that just really upset me, because he is a model of a small family dairy farm whose sons didn't want to go into the business because they just thought this is commodity slavery, selling milk to an uncertain market. He's a price taker, not a price maker, had no control over where his milk went. And his sons just thought, I don't think I want to do that. So when he said, will you milk when I retire? He's 68. They said no. So that is a priceless piece of social and environmental capital, which is gone because of this commodity slavery, which I think most farmers are on the receiving end of these days. And I think the question is what we can do about that. And I think the best way that the Sustainable Food Trust can respond to that is to measure the environmental and social capital of all farms. And then if we do that in an accurate and harmonized way, so we're all using the same metrics, then we can find out how many people are employed on these smaller dairy farms, which I think is priceless social capital, what that benefit of that is. And as the chap who was collecting our carrots said to me last week, he said, well, if there are more people employed on farms, on small farms, this is good for rugby in Wales. He said, the young people are playing rugby. Think about it. It's an interesting point.
Yeah.
And he said he sings in a male voice choir. And the truth is that all the schools around here, the number of children going to them is diminishing. That might be partly other factors like fertility and stuff like that. But a lot of it is young people are leaving the area. They're going to cities. So this has a cultural impact. It has a social impact, and it has an economic impact. And because we have been measuring the social damage caused by the demise of small dairy farms, we haven't been measuring or counting the cost. And I think that's one area where the Sustainable Food Trust can really make a difference over the coming years, because we've developed this common framework for measuring not only the climate and the nature impacts of farming, but also the social capital. And that John Tinloff, bless his heart, is a loss of social capital to Ceredigion, and we need to reverse that. What do you think?
I think you're right. Now, my question straight back to you is, what happens to that farm next? What's going to happen to it? Is it going to be lost to a bigger farm, or is it going to turn to beef, or are they going to grow carrots and be your competition?
I think almost certainly there's a neighbouring farm, family relations. They will probably expand their dairy herd. Now you could say, well, that's great, because, there'll be 200 or 300 cows or maybe 400 cows, and they'll have very modern buildings, and they'll sell to one of the companies that will continue to pay them just above the cost of production on average, and they'll still survive. It is a survive. It's like get big or get out. That's the message. And I don't like that. We have 90 cows here. The cows, if you go in the field with our cows, they walk towards you, not away from you, because there's so much love and trust. And I think it's very difficult to maintain that if you have a very large herd. I think things break down if you go big. And that's not the fault of the farmers, because what can they do? Get big or get out. And arguably, get big and get more intensive or get out. So I think we need to reverse those messages and give pride back to the small family dairy farm.
Now, what about your farm then, Patrick? That's a loss partly to do with the other farm is loss partly to do with retirement and no succession. So your farm, would you say 90 cows is a real classic sort of small dairy? Do you think your farm would survive if you didn't have your cheese business alongside it?
No, I don't think so. I think were we not have been able to go into cheese making, and were it not for my day job, we would be one of those statistics. That's the truth of it.
Yeah.
So,
Do you think
you know,
without
I'll
your
give you
day
an
job, do you think you
example.
could do it?
I'll give you an example. Over Christmas and the New Year, we're planning not to make cheese. And if we're lucky, First Milk will buy our milk. And they're a great, actually, great dairy co-op. We could talk more about them. And Robert Craig is involved with them, and they're in the supply chain to Nestle, actually, which are doing something very interesting, which we could come back to. But if we didn't have them to buy our milk over Christmas, it'd be even more difficult for us. But they will only pay us probably somewhere between 40 and 50 pence a litre if we're lucky, which is below the cost of production. So there you go. It's really difficult. If you don't add value on the farm, you'll be a statistic. That's the truth.
Yeah, I think it is a very difficult situation for dairy. The problem with dairy as well is you have to play such a long game with investment. You know, as a beef farmer, we could sell all our beef animals tomorrow and then we could buy a load more beef animals next year and we could be back into beef. And really, in between time, we've got no costs because we own all our barns. They weren't expensive. We don't have a big dairy system sitting empty. So, if the thing is with dairy is you don't have that long-term stability because
Yeah.
you're a price taker, but you also do have a very long-term investment. So you might have £1 million invested in a new parlour and shed system, but you don't really know what the outcome's going to be of that. It's the strangest gamble you could possibly make, really, as a business person,
It
but
is,
people love it.
but it's interesting that when we started here in 1973, there were 3,000 dairy farmers. Think about that. If there's only going to be 6,000 left in the whole of the UK in a year's time, or even less than that, 5,000 maybe, there were 3,000 dairy farms in Ceredigion supplying the local creamery. And every single small holding had a churn stand. This was still in the churn days. We went from cast iron churns to aluminium churns. That was a big upgrade. And then in the mid 70s, people started to have what were called bulk tanks. That was like
Mm.
really huge. So I've seen this great span of agricultural dairy history where it's become impossible to be a smallholder dairy farmer. What a loss of social capital that is. And arguably, we have our cheese Havard, which is named after a small holding which we've rented since 1980. The river, which it borders on, is now a dead river. And that's largely because of intensive dairy farming, not exclusively, but because these very large farms end up being quite heavily polluting, we're killing all the rivers of Wales. So there's a lot
Mm.
to think about there, is all I'm saying, really.
Yes, I think we do tend to wrap all. So you might have all beef in one category, all dairy in one category, all chicken production in one category. Whereas the reality is, every single system is nuanced, and we should value systems rather than products.
Yes.
But looking at obviously you do have to keep your farm profitable, and I know that you have started growing your carrots again, as you used to do, and you said you stopped for quite a while, but you've had to start growing them again because you wanted to expand the farm in some way. But you were talking about there's a weeder or something coming your way. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Should we talk about? I mean, there's a lot that we could. I think we should come. Excuse me. I think we should come back to carrots and local carrots because that's a whole thing we could
That's a
go into.
different story.
And
Let's talk
and
tech, Patrick.
yes,
Let's
also
stop
it did.
talking animals and talk tech.
Yeah, it has involved. I've been in a meeting this week talking about the future of the Welsh Veg in Schools project, and I'm in another one next Wednesday. So maybe when we next speak, I can tell you what's going on because there's a fascinating project going on there involving public procurement, veg in schools, and also the site of Lampeter University. But why don't we
Oh,
just
yes.
touch on tech? Because you will know this, and I know a little bit, but not enough. I have heard tell that you can get these gizmos, which are solar powered on wheels, which go along our 72-inch spacing. Sorry, I'm still imperial carrot bed,
It's
and
not ideal when
they,
you're talking tech, by the way.
so so basically, this is how wide the tractor wheels are, and you have a bed, and then you have three rows of carrots, and of course, the big issue with carrots is weeding them. But there is tell now that there are these robotic weeders, which basically have cameras. They can tell the difference between the weeds and the carrots, and they can even tell the difference between different species of weeds and kill the ones, zap the ones with an electric pulse that you want to kill and leave the other ones. And
Mm.
that way, it's a revolution in weeding technology without pesticides or herbicides in this case. So, am I interested in this? Yes, I am. Do I think we should kill all the weeds and only leave the carrots? Possibly not. But it sounds like this technology could do both. Let's discuss it. Because you know something about this, don't you?
Yeah, well, when I was in AGRITECHNICA, I saw all of these different weeding technologies and all sorts of robotics, but also, electric tractors, which is my new passion. But yeah, that's the carbon robotics weeder. I think you're talking about, the zapper. I saw that actually working. They had it sort of zapping as like a demo in the halls. It was really amazing the way it works. It uses a huge amount of power and it's very slow. So it's
Oh, dear. Where's the power
well, I
come
say
from?
well, from the tractor, from the PTO. So it's got
Oh,
a
so
little
you have to have a
generator on the top of it.
PTO generator. You can't just do it off solar.
Not for the zapper, no, because when you're using a laser, it takes quite a lot of power to laser something from a distance. And it'll also, the bigger the weed, the slower it'll go. So if you can catch them early, it's great. So it's perfect for really early establishment stuff. But then you also have other ones which are solar, but they work with a little hoe. So you probably had like a steerage hoe in the past on your tractor.
Yeah.
Well, imagine a steerage hoe with lots of little rows with tiny little blades that kind of go in and can go in around all of the plants. And so if you use that one, that's completely autonomous, that one. So it goes off on its own and it does run on solar actually. And that one, if it plants it, so that one needs to plant it as well. So it seeds, and then it knows where every single plant is with a GPS location point within a couple of millimeters. And then it will come back around over and over again through the season. It'll just run up and down through your carrots, weeding, and it just goes in and out with this little blade almost, this little hoe. And that will keep it all, because it knows exactly where they are. So that one's
So
not using cameras.
how much does that cost?
Oh gosh, I don't know, Patrick. Now you've asked me.
Well,
I
I've
wasn't into
heard
that. I
tell
was
that
just
I've
obsessed by
heard
the
tell
tech.
I've heard tell that the cheap one is £100,000.
That would be about right. Yeah,
So
that
we can't
sounds about
afford
right.
£100,000. No way. But maybe are there sort of government-funded pilot thingies that we could hitch a ride on and get the machine posted onto this farm, and then we can talk about it next year? What do you think?
You're trying to mine me for my grant funding knowledge, aren't you?
Correct.
Well, there is one actually that you could probably go onto at the moment. It's the Adopt Fund. So Adopt is for on-farm innovation trials. It's up to £100,000 for a project, and it's essentially it has to be farmer-led. So you could do it, but you also have to be doing it in collaboration. And so if you and I did it together, for example, we could start a project and we could look at autonomous weeding.
But
And
supposing I think I'm right in thinking that there's already an Adopt program in England. They might be able to post their machine onto our farm because we can try it in Wales, kind of thing. What do you think about that?
oh, of course, you can't access that fund, can you, Patrick?
No,
Oh,
no.
you can never access any of
I
these funds.
know. You get all the
Oh,
luck in Cornwall, don't you? You're regarded. It used to be an EU, whatever it's called, Objective One region, and we were too back in the EU days, and now we don't get anything. It's
no,
hard.
we're deprived. That's the trouble, you know?
Well,
Yeah, we're a
you're
long
not
way.
deprived because you got back in, didn't you?
Yeah, well, yeah, we've done all right because we are still part of those studies, and it actually all came out of an innovative farmers trial, which was set up by the Soil Association, as you know, and it was up to £10,000 per trial, and it was such a success, and we've done a few of those down here. One making homebrew biostimulant from seaweed, which I think we should probably talk about another time. And then I did another one on using sisal twine on round bales instead of the plastic net, because I hate plastic net. It goes everywhere. Every single time you cut it, microplastics go everywhere. Anyway, so those are the two trials we did on innovative
I
farmers,
think
but they've now expanded it.
let's make a note to ourselves. that we come back to both of those issues
Okay. I think
because I
that's a good
think
idea.
both of us are very interested in soil biostimulants. Um,
Mhm.
at one end, are they a miracle which is going to transform agriculture, or are they snake oil? And how do we tell the difference? And on
Yeah.
the other end, the plastics end, I think more and more farmers are desperate to wean ourselves off our umbilical dependency on plastic. So let's come back to both of those.
Yeah, great idea. I think that's fair. And then just going back to the tech side of things, I think another thing I want to talk about, but whether we have time today, well, let's just touch on it quickly. While I was also looking at those carbon robotics weeders and those other ones over there, I also spotted what the future tractor is going to look like. And I am now going to put my proverbial money. I don't like gambling, so I never put money on anything. I always lose. But if I was to gamble, I'm going to say the tractors are going to be in the majority electric. And that seems to be the motion of travel at the moment. So I think I saw all sorts of different tractors from all the different manufacturers around that. Some methane's also got a bit of a place, I think. So New Holland has got their methane tractors. They've just brought out the new T7 methane tractor, which is a big one, around more like 200 horsepower. And so that's a bit of an option, but you have to have a source of methane, of course. So whether it's through a biodigester or through a methane capture system on your slurry pit, something like that. But I think the sort of mid tractor, the one that you and I would use day to day, going around the yard, doing the light field work, that kind of thing, the sort of the real workhorse of the farm, I think it's going to end up being electric because
Well,
battery technology is moving really fast.
that's interesting for me because, as you know, I've got a connection with JCB.
Mm.
I used to advise them on environmental matters. And because of that, I got wind of their electric loadall, and we purchased one 2 years ago. So we have an electric JCB loadall, and we've actually rather fallen in love with it. There have been some obviously technical problems because it's always the case, isn't it? When you introduce something new, um, you end up suffering from the ironing out the early problems. But
Hmm.
here's my analysis after a couple of years of using it. It's wonderfully quiet. It's an efficient use of power because you don't have an engine running all the time. You only use it when you're doing either moving it or using its hydraulics. We use it every day for putting out our silage in winter, for mucking out, for bale handling and other stuff. Its big challenge, Achilles heel weakness, which is potentially overcomable, is its battery life. Its battery life is only 2.7 hours. And as you know, with electric vehicles, they're overcoming that, and they're adding, 50 miles or 100 miles every year, it seems, at the moment, to the
Mm.
range. Now, if they could do that with electric JCBs, I think particularly JCBs that are used around the farm, this would be brilliant. But it's interesting that you mentioned methane or hydrogen or electric, because Anthony Bamford, Lord Bamford, it's still a family-owned company, has put a lot of eggs in the hydrogen basket. And I have
Mm.
talked to him about this, and I think there's a place for both. I mean, if we can make hydrogen available at a farm level or methane and power existing fossil fuel based engines with a different fuel source, great. But I also think that maybe not up to that sort of 200 horsepower range that you just mentioned, where you need so much power that it's difficult to get it from batteries. I think there's a big future for electric vehicles, including electric loadals. And I'm rather hoping that they can improve it with the next range because it's lovely to operate. It's really, it's a joy actually to operate such a quiet vehicle, which works pretty well.
Yeah, I think in terms of the loadals, it's such a no-brainer. It's such a controllable power. I've been driving an electric car for 7 years now, and the sort of the experience has always been wonderful. Obviously, the power is insane. I used to have a Tesla Model 3 Performance, so like 500 horsepower, it would make a Ferrari blush. But it's and now I've got an ID Buzz van, and I love the things. I just drove to the Aberdeen conference, so that's 750 miles up into the north
How
of
many
Scotland.
times did you have to stop, and what was the charging points like?
Well, I stopped 5 times, so that's quite a
Bloody
lot,
hell.
I would say. But it was like a 14-hour drive, so I'm quite happy to stop that number of times, and about 20 minutes per stop. So it wasn't too bad. But that's a big blocky van. My brother-in-law's got a car that does 350 miles on its range, so that would have been only, well, probably 2 stops. But if you've stopped 2 times in that time, I'd say you probably have got a stronger bladder than I.
So,
So it's
so
no
could you
problem.
find the charging points, or did it tell you?
Oh yeah, I planned it before I was going to go because I wanted to make sure I'm going to be on the cheapest charging points. But the reality is, there's a charging point everywhere now. It's not a problem if you don't mind just paying whatever it is. But it's the same with fuel stations. I would never fill up my car on the most expensive motorway one either. So I would always research which is the cheapest fuel. So I did plan it, and it worked perfectly well, and I was quite pleased.
So what's the
I'm
max
just about
range in
to.
what's your max range on your van?
At this time of the year, it's about 200 miles. In the summer, it's 250. So
Yeah.
there you go.
So, but it would, to me, with electric cars, we're still on diesel. It would be great if it was 300. It seems to me that 300 is a kind of a tipping point thing. That if you've got
Yeah.
300, you're starting to compete with the range that you've got in a normal fuel tank.
Yeah. So there's loads of cars now out that will do 300 miles. The
Yeah.
only reason mine doesn't is because it's a van. The actual car version, not a problem. 300 miles is easily achievable from loads of different providers now. In fact, I just saw that the BMW like iX has come out, and it's like more like 450 miles, but you can charge it at 500 kilowatts. So you can charge it back up from like 10 to 80% in like 10 to 15 minutes. That's
So
huge speed, and then do another 350 miles.
what's the term for a petrol head who's transferred to electric or other?
I don't
Because
know. What would you call me?
you're a bit of one
I,
of those, aren't you?
I am. What do we call it? As a zap head, something like that. I don't know. I absolutely love my electric cars. And we've also changed our buggy on the farm. So we had a Polaris Ranger diesel, and it was never as good as our quad bikes because it's slower, but it's obviously way more efficient, way more useful because it's got this load bay in the back, more seats. My dad couldn't kill himself on it as easily. It's always a good thing. And then we changed it to the electric, so the kinetic one. It's now got 100 horsepower because it's electric. It does 50 miles on the range. It does 56 miles an hour. So absolute fire. So that's that thing there. Yes, it was more money, but we've sold one of our Land Rovers that we use for going around the farm. So Dad uses that as his car, basically. So we've registered it as a car for the road so that we can drive it anywhere, anytime.
Is it a
And
Polaris?
it's a Polaris, yes, and it's brilliant. I absolutely love that thing. It's
How much did
so
it cost?
fast. Well, so it's about £25,000, so pretty serious cash. But as you might be aware, Patrick, I love a grant, and I managed to get some funding off that, and so
Yes.
I got it a bit cheaper. But
I
I think
think
as
I
an
need
early
to talk to you more
adopter,
about
that's amazing.
grants.
Well, if I always say. I'm never guilty about getting a grant because I do with the grant what they wanted me to do with the grant. So I normally do something which is more sustainable. And with that Polaris, like the reality is I'm an early adopter, so I'm helping that technology develop just like you and that JCB. And it means that they've got all that testing out there. It means I'm taking a risk. And so I should be helped to do that because you guys at home will be able to buy them cheaper in the future, which are more reliable and help those manufacturers invest in that technology. So I was a really early person getting my Tesla as well. I think I was in the first 3 months of it coming out. And everyone thought I was a madman, but that one was, I didn't get a grant on that, sadly.
All right. Well, look, we better quit while we're ahead, I think, because
Yeah, we should.
people have been losing the will to live. We've been going on for so long. But it's been fascinating talking. I mean, maybe we should just touch on what we're doing next week. What are you doing?
Well, I am actually, so there's this new announcement come down from the government and the budget. So the budget we were going to talk about the budget, Patrick, but to be honest, there's not a lot to talk about.
Well,
There's a
we could
tiny
talk
change to
about
the inheritance tax.
We could talk about 3p a mile for electric vehicles. Do you think that's okay?
I do actually. I think we all have to pay for the roads, and we weren't paying for the roads as an early adopter. I never paid for that. Great, lucky me. But we're all driving electric cars now. You can't expect to have no potholes if you don't pay to have no potholes.
Okay, so
So,
what else do you want to talk about? Any other budget news?
well, there was a little change to the inheritance tax, so that it was something to do with if your partner had already died, you can still use their, or dies, you can use their inheritance tax sort of allowance. So that's tiny, tiny bit. Honestly, it's pathetic. It's not good enough. There's so much better solution. Come to me if you want the solution. I have it, and you'll thank me later. I
Well,
won't go into that now.
we'll maybe reserve that for another day because, as you probably know, I think excluding farmland from inheritance tax is entirely illogical. And the reason I say that is because I think it's important to redistribute wealth and particularly keep family farms small. And although I know that the previous announcement didn't get that right, I think it's the principle I'm interested in.
Yeah, well, I have a solution that would fix you for you, and because I don't quite agree with you, but I have a solution I think we'd both be happy with. So if any minister wants to call me, let me know. And then, but they also did announce there's a Kerno fund, which I love a fund, and so £30 million coming down to Cornwall for development of industry, so critical minerals, renewables, things like that. And it's really interesting because to this week, we've got Truro College, so our local college, is doing this project looking at rocks and the potential for rocks. And under our land here, we've got serpentine. So serpentine is one of the rarest rocks in the world. We've got a patch under the Lizard Peninsula in Cornwall. There's a tiny, tiny patch in Scotland and a tinier patch in South Africa. And it's this really cool, beautiful rock. You can always get it carved and buy little bits of it if you
Well,
want
look,
down here.
you people in Cornwall have all the luck, don't you? It's not fair.
Well, this is it. Well, they're
Yeah.
going to test it because, in theory, our serpentine rock has a huge natural concentration of hydrogen. So those hydrogen tractors we talked about, that's
Here
the
we
sort of
go.
place it could come from.
Here we go. So it's really not fair. I'm having Cornish envy, but we can come back to that. And by the way, on
Yeah.
the subject of Cornwall, we both know Tim Schmidt, and I've known him for a long time. And I just was chatting to him day before yesterday on the phone, and he wants to do a podcast with me quite soon. So look out for that, because
Yes.
there's the two of us doing this, and then we can have guests too, hopefully. But he
Yes.
thought we probably have so much to discuss that it should just be me and him. So that's going to happen. But also, just tell you what I'm doing next week. I'm going to Barcelona for my sins. And I'm participating in a conference on measuring climate, nature, and social impacts. And my mission is to try to get a common framework for measurement all over the world. So you, as a farmer, can go to a farmer anywhere and share information about what your climate, nature, and people impacts and outcomes are. And that way, we'll be better off because we can better to communicate with the people who buy our food in relation to its sustainability. It could even lead to a common labelling scheme. So we can talk. I'll share with you next week what happened there. I'm also involved with a very interesting project in West Wales, as you know, which is not only Welsh Regent schools, but also Lampeter University, which is the oldest university in Wales, was shut down this year because they ran out of money. But Ceredigion Council are entering into a new partnership with them to establish a sustainable education centre, which I think will be bigger than just Wales, if you see what I mean. So I'm going to a meeting on Wednesday to discuss the future of that programme. I'll share the outcomes of that with you as well.
That's great. That's super exciting. I have one little super tease that I'm not going to tell you anything about. I have a big announcement hopefully coming. I've got a meeting this week coming about my fossil-free farming project. So if it goes well, that meeting, I'll tell you about that too, because that's quite an exciting little development for that. Anyway, I think that's all we've got time for today because we've gone way over. My
Sure
apologies. We got caught up talking about abattoirs for probably a bit too long, but I hope everyone found it interesting. We'll be back as soon as we possibly can with a little bit more exciting stuff that's going on around sustainable food farming and the environment. And if anyone wants to give us questions, topics they want us to talk about, please do get in touch. You can email us at the Sustainable Food Trust. To be honest, email anything or contact us through any of the channels around the Sustainable Food Trust. We'll get them. We'll try and include them in our next
and
podcast.
feedback is welcome, because feedback, negative as well as positive, because we want to get it right, because you, our listeners, are our amplifiers to get more people more familiar with the story behind their food and their farming.
Absolutely. So we'll speak to you soon. Have a lovely day. I think it's sunny outside. I'm going to go and do a bit of farming.